Well, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Gina Gleason. I'm with Family Research Council, and I am the Culture Impact Team Coordinator. My job is to train people who are interested in starting culture impact teams in their church. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And I know that not many churches do have culture impact teams, but our goal is to show you how simple it really is. And if you are here listening to what I have to say, it's probably because you are interested in what is going on in the culture. So you are the perfect person to be here listening to us today. So thank you for being with us. I look at my job as a culture impact team leader as a watchman on the wall. If you read the ancient book of Isaiah, and 21:6 says, "Go set a watchman, let him declare what he sees." And that's kind of what I see myself doing as a culture impact team leader in my own church. I monitor what's going on in the culture. I take a look at not only the cultural issues, the TV, the media, the music, but also legislation, which is a very important part of what I do for my church as a culture impact team leader. So I monitor, and then I report what I see to my pastor and to my congregation. Basically, what we're doing is giving the people a warning about what it is we see happening in the culture, because most people do not have the same interest we have. They may see the moral decline taking place in the culture, but they may not be seeing where some of that moral decline is originating, and most of the time it's through legislation or through media. So I'm privileged to be able to do that for my pastor at my church. But the great thing about Family Research Council and what they've done is to set up a website and produce a culture impact team manual. And you may have already seen this manual. This is what it looks like. This has just been updated. And the thing about this manual, it's quite thick. And so what I want to talk to you about tonight is 4 main points of starting a culture impact team. Because you can look at this manual and you can be easily overwhelmed thinking, I can't do all of these things that they're talking about in here, but we don't want you to feel that you have to take on every project that's in here. There's just 4 main things that I'm going to talk about tonight that I want you to remember, because we're going to talk about at the beginning, we'll talk about them at the end. The 4 things are forming a team, communicating with the pastor and the congregation, participating in the electoral process, and influencing your community, state, and nation. So the role of a culture impact team in the local church is to inform, because people don't want to be paying attention to all of these pieces of legislation that are being introduced. And if you've ever monitored legislation, sometimes it can be a heartbreaker, because you can see how bad some of this legislation is at the state and federal level. Once you introduce the legislation, you're going to want to equip the congregation to deal with this legislation, either supporting or opposing legislation, or whatever the cultural issue may be. You also want to alert and just give rise to attention, making phone calls, and mobilizing, because mobilizing the congregation really does influence the local community. So let's focus on one of the main things we started on, forming a team. The leader's role. The leader is the person that is going to be communicating with the pastor. You are going to go to your pastor, find out how much communication he wants. I'm sure you don't want to be someone that is going to be bombarding your pastor every day with emails and phone calls, and you don't want him to be running away from you because you have so much information. But, talk to him. Would you like me to send you a weekly email? Would you like to meet once a month or once a week? Decide what your pastor is interested in doing, or maybe a pastor overseer. When I first started at my church, I had a pastor overseer. But the more my pastor and I began to work together, that pastor overseer wasn't really needed any longer, and I communicated directly with my pastor. So you are also going to be the one that is going to be praying about every action your ministry takes, because ultimately you are responsible for every project, every piece of material that's produced, every action. So you need wisdom, discernment. You really need to know how much information to be giving out to the church, because you do not want to come across as a political action committee or some kind of political party. So you really need to have a lot of discernment regarding that. You need to recruit a team. There's several ways you can recruit a team. You can put an announcement out in the church bulletin, make an announcement from the pulpit, tell friends about it, but mostly pray about it. And the Lord is going to bring you every team member that you need. I have a very large church, and I have a very large culture impact team at my church. I haven't had to recruit. To tell you the truth, the Lord has really brought everyone to our team. And it's been a blessing because the people that come to the team are like-minded. They have the same passion, the same interest for following elections or legislation or anything that may be going on in the culture. So that builds a team. That team becomes a family. So when you're forming a team, there's some things that you should think about. Setting strategy meetings. Now, it may just be you to start off, so there's really no need for meetings. But at some point, you may start seeing that more people are coming around because they see that you're getting organized in the church. So set up strategy meetings, and that's where you pray about every project that you're going to take on. You pray about events and the future of the culture impact team. And that's very important for the fellowship also of the team and building that unity. Then you also can have meetings for the entire congregation. You can bring in speakers to talk about pro-life issues, marriage issues, and there's just so many places that you can find a speaker from. Some of the pro-life centers, some of the pro-family organizations that are in your state, in your community, and some of the leaders that you meet from attending different events. There's just a variety of places that you can find a good speaker, but you don't always have to have a speaker. You can set the meeting up so that you are discussing just current legislation, current issues, have team members take certain parts of the meeting and do a special report on something that may be taking place in the culture at the time. And there's just a variety of ways that you can set up a monthly meeting. We've been hosting monthly meetings at my own church for years, maybe 9, 10 years already. And every month, faithfully, except at Christmas time, we have a meeting, and we are known for having these meetings so the congregation is able to come in. And we make advertisements through our church bulletin, through the pulpit, through our website. So when you're forming your team, think about developing a mission and purpose statement. Not every team is going to want to do that, but it's just a suggestion to help guide you in the path that you're going to take. When you look at the manual, the CIT manual, you're going to see some suggestions and some CITs that have set up culture mission purposes. So take a look at that, and I think that you'll be encouraged by that. You want to organize the team members if you have a large team. Because I have a large team, what we did was we decided that we were going to ask them about what their particular interests were. Some people have a tendency to be more pro-life, focused on elections, focused on marriage, or the homosexual agenda, you name it. There's all kinds of different interests. So we started grouping the people together according to their interests, so that way they monitored those issues more often. And when we had monthly meetings and we had reports being given by the team members, it was because they were really interested in that. Also, you want to develop a budget. Now, not every church is going to require that you develop a budget, but that's something that you'll need to talk to your pastor about. And it's all according to what he decides or your board decides, but to manage a culture impact team, it's really inexpensive. I can't think of any major costs that you would need. Printing paper, paper for printing action alerts or some type of update, but that's pretty much it. Communicating with the congregation and with the pastor. So as the culture impact leader, you yourself need to stay informed. Are you signing up for the email updates that are coming from some of the pro-family organizations? If you look at your CIT manual, there's plenty of suggestions, and the way I get my information is from those email updates. And I don't take a whole lot of them. I can do just fine with 5 or so major organizations, because you can easily flood your email box with a lot of information. But if you pick 4 or 5 good websites, you'll get everything that you need to stay informed about what's going on. So from there, you're going to start talking to your pastor about what's going on. There are a lot of things happening within the culture and regarding legislation that are truly, anti-Christ or anti-family, but you're going to have discernment about what information you're going to take to the pastor, about the things that you may want to take action on, because not everything is an item that you're going to want to call the congregation and alert them about. I know that in California, where I come from, there's several thousand bills introduced every year, from 2,000 to 4,000 bills introduced. And any one legislative year, there could easily be 5 to 10 terrible pieces of legislation. I generally have a rule that I stick to the most important 2, 3, maybe once in a while, 4 pieces of legislation that I will alert the church about, because it just becomes overwhelming, and you do not want to overwhelm the pastor or the congregation. So let's say you pick 4 or 5 pieces of legislation, you're going to study them, you're going to track them, and when necessary, that's when you start making action alerts, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's a lot of ways of informing the congregation, and I'll go through that in a minute. But be creative and encourage the church to participate in what you're doing, because a lot of what you're doing is for their benefit and for the benefit of our children and pro-life causes and marriage and you name it. One of the things I suggest you do, and it's easy to do, is to set up a culture impact center. It's as simple as setting up a table. And that table is filled with information about what you're monitoring, anything that you think that the church should know about. And there's a few ways that you can do that. Family Research Council has a couple of options for you. They have an actual center that you can purchase. They have a tablecloth that you can just throw over a table. And so those are some really easy ways to draw attention from the congregation. They also have a display stand that you can just load it up with some material that either you can get through FRC or some other pro-family organizations. But what I simply do is set up a table at my church, and this is an example of one of my tables. Every time I set up a table, it always looks different. Sometimes it's going to be packed with information, and sometimes it's just going to have a few things on. But this month I'm talking about registering to vote, a meeting that we have coming up about our book club, and getting our Watchman Ministry newsletter. So there's a variety of things you can do, and it's actually kind of fun getting that table set up. We're in the courtyard at our church once a month, providing that information, and the church, the body, knows that they can come to our table anytime. They can register to vote. They can ask about something that they've heard about in the news or in the culture. And it's just a great place for the congregation to come and to gather around and support your work. And every so often you can have a big to-do, like a voter registration drive or a some type of activity around election time, where you can encourage the church to register to vote. So when you are conducting voter registration drives, first, of course, you want to get permission from your pastor, and you want to follow the church's procedures for setting up your table or for doing any of those types of activities. And if you haven't worked with the church in that way, then you need to find out what your church procedures are, because sometimes they'll require that you fill out forms, or that you're contacting a certain person to get permission to set up that table. And they'll give you the location and those types of things, but it's very important that you have permission to set that up. At election time, you want to follow your state's election calendar, because, of course, there are voter registration deadlines. And that's important, because you don't want to have a voter registration drive and all the forms that you collect or that you turn in are past the voter registration deadline. So if you have experience with that, well, we'll talk some more about voter registration for your state. Promote the event through the church pulpit, through the media department, through the website. There's plenty of ways that you can get the word out about your voter registration drives, but participating in the electoral process is one of the important things that the Culture Impact Team does. So, you know, your state may be having elections every other year or so, maybe some local elections come around sooner, but it's important to connect with your Secretary of State's website and get that information. Every state has a Secretary of State, and they have all the information that you need to learn about elections in your own state. So once you have permission to have a voter registration drive, you need to recruit volunteers. And it's really not difficult to do that. I think that most people understand how important it is to register voters. So work on that. That's a really easy thing to do. And schedule the volunteers to work on the voter registration tables depending on how many services you have, the days. You know, just put together a simple schedule and get those people scheduled to work on that day. And prepare and gather supplies, typical things, tables, black pens, I understand, in Colorado, clipboards, signs, voter registration forms, and voter information such as maybe party platform comparisons, voter guides. I know that every state does have a pro-family organization. Most of them do produce a great voter guide. I've seen many of them, and they're wonderful to help the voters determine who they're going to vote for in the election. So when you set up your voter registration table, of course you want to set up in a visible place, and that way you can make sure that the congregation sees you, decorate your table, make it patriotic, and set out the needed supplies. But of course, remain nonpartisan. That is just so important being in a church. I can't stress that highly enough. One of the things you want to do is get a list of the people that you register to vote. Most states do not allow you to take the name or copy the card that the voter registration form. So it's easy to just take the name of the people that are coming to your table. And the reason you want to do this is you want to be able to communicate with them, remind them of election deadlines or early voting. Another thing you can do is go to the state, to the FRC website, and you can look up the state family policy councils. Well, not every state, but maybe 38 states or so have state policy councils that will provide you with the information that you need about local elections in your state and help you if you need voter guides. Also, in the CIT manual that I just mentioned, there's a great list of things that a church can and cannot do on page 24 and 25. You want to become familiar with those do's and don'ts as a ministry leader, because you want to make sure that you and your team are always within those guidelines. Your goal is not to be part of the Pulpit Freedom Sunday project that, you know, the pastor stands up and talks about elections or candidates. Let the pastor do that. You just want to follow all the rules and make sure that you're not getting your church in trouble in any way. One of the other things I want to mention about the focus is influencing your community, state, and nation. You're going to influence by impacting, influencing, networking with the people in your community. Reach out to the other churches in your community and talk to them about what it is you're doing, what you're learning about, and some of the goals that you may share, and meet, pray, and bring up legislation, bring up some of the cultural issues. And FRC really believes that networking with other churches is going to really help influence your community. I know that we do that ourselves in our own community, and we have had a great influence in our community because they are aware that we are aware of what is going on in the community. So that is so important, because you know, you hear about California and all the crazy things that come out of California, genderless bathrooms and fairness ordinances and things like that. Well, they don't stay in California. I have heard in this last month of more cities from other parts of the state that are dealing with these genderless bathrooms. And they're calling them fairness ordinances in some places. And cities are passing these. I know that Baton Rouge, the church just got together and organized and beat back this genderless bathroom type of law that was going on. And sometimes you think it's a statewide issue. A city can change their ordinances and make that the law in the state. So you can go into a city and bathrooms are open to everyone. I know that also Fayetteville, Arkansas is dealing with the same thing right now. They had to gather signatures on a referendum, and they'll be voting in a few days. And it's just taking place all over the country. So when people tell me, well, you come from California, I know why you are organized there and why you're doing these things. I tell them, yes, but what you need to understand is that these things are spreading across the country. And you need to be organized now. Don't wait till they show up at your doorstep. If you're organized as a team, if your pastor's involved, if you're networking with the other churches in the community, when these things come to your doorstep, you will have an instant network set up and you'll know how to fight this. And I'd like to tell the story about how our organizing in our own church has made a difference. Many years ago, when we were first getting used to the whole idea of repealing laws or supporting laws, we just started really trying to network with the other churches and other organizations in our state. When I found out that Prop 8 was being talked about, it was at this point a petition, we got involved. I talked to my pastor about what was going on, and he encouraged me to keep us informed and aware of what was going on with the initiative. So we became one of the churches that got involved in collecting signatures on Prop 8. And when we collected signatures on that petition, our church at that time may have been around 7,000 people. Well, our church alone collected 10,000 signatures on that petition. And that's because we were determined to defend marriage in our Constitution. The next time we had a petition, it was for what was called SB 48, which was a gay history bill for the public schools, requiring that every child from kindergarten to high school learned gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender history. The law was passed, and so we tried to repeal it. Well, that was another petition. On that petition, our team collected 19,000 signatures, almost double what we had from Prop 8. And so we were amazed by that. The next petition that came along was another bill that required that boys and girls share restrooms, showers, and locker rooms in the public school. That was also signed into law by our governor. Once again, we organized as a team, and we collected over 46,000 signatures at our church. And our church at that time was about 10,000 people. Now, the reason that happened, I believe, is because not only did the Lord bless us with that, but we as a ministry got better and better and better at what we were doing. My pastor and I, as a CIT leader, worked together. And we worked together to be more effective and influence the congregation to become engaged. So when I was working on projects, he would often stop in to see what I was doing. When he stopped in one day and he said, okay, what are you working on today? And I said, well, I'm organizing a door-to-door campaign to collect signatures to repeal the co-ed bathroom law. And he says, oh, okay, well, he goes, I can do that. And I said, I knew you would. And I happened to have his clipboard sitting on my desk with his petitions and an outline of his neighborhood, because he lives down the street from me, and gave him that clipboard, and he and his wife were going to go door to door in his neighborhood collecting signatures. But not only did he do that, he led, and he went up to the congregation on a Sunday and held up his clipboard and said, I'm going door to door to collect signatures on this petition. I want to encourage you to do that. That was one of the things he did. So, of course, the people thought that was fantastic, that their pastor would actually get up and do something like that. So we saw people coming in not only to our door-to-door campaign on the Saturdays that we did it, but they did it throughout the entire campaign. And not only did they do that, they went door to door in other neighborhoods. They went to the city parks. They went to the school board meetings, to the city council meetings. Every place that they went, they took the clipboard with the petition with them. One day, my pastor went up to the podium and also said, this past Saturday, I was collecting signatures on this petition at the local Target, which is just like a Walmart. I think you have a Target here. And again, that encouraged the congregation. So it's no wonder that we collected 46,000 when we're only a church of 10,000. I mean, I don't mean only, but we are a church of 10,000. That's over 4 times the population of our church. And it was nonstop. These people were passionate. And, you know, I just really feel that the pastor led by an example. So I feel that when the shepherd leads, the flock is going to follow. So when I tell people that story, they're amazed because I just want to, you know, it's the influence of the pastor upon the congregation. We need the pastors to lead. And so I thank God for my pastor and what he did because it did make a difference. I know that some of you are just starting out with your culture impact teams, and I know that there are some that may be a little more advanced in some of the activities that you've already participated in. You may have already participated in elections. You may have produced different projects for your church or in other organizations that you are in. But I also have another organization that would help you to do some more advanced projects. So if you go to faithandpublicpolicy.org, that website is going to give you some more advanced projects that you can be involved in. One of them is to create legislative action alerts. When I said that you'll be monitoring legislation, well, the question is going to be, if it's bad legislation, what are we going to do about it? Well, if you're getting email updates from the pro-family organizations like Family Research Council or like your state policy council, they're going to send you updates about what's happening in the Capitol or in Washington, D.C. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that email that they send you and you're going to put it in a flyer and make it an action alert. This flyer right here, cut in half, you can see the front and the back. It says Watchman right here on the top of this one. That happens to be the name of our CIT at our church. We happen to name ours. But on the front, we describe a piece of legislation that was introduced by the legislature in Sacramento. It's a description on the front. When you turn it over on the back there, you can see that the second side has some action steps. Call your senator and ask him to vote no on AB 1266 or whatever the piece of legislation may be. You pass this action alert out at church. Now you can do it by just having it at your Culture Impact Center. You can pass it out when people walk into the congregation, when the congregation is gathering for Sunday service. And there's plenty of other ways that you can get this action alert out. But this, I think, for our CIT is one of the most important things we do. Because I'll tell you, the legislators in my area all around us, they know who we are as a church. Because they know that we are monitoring what they are voting on. And they can't get away with a terrible vote. Because our people are calling them on a regular basis. Like I said, 3 or 4 pieces of legislation a year. So they're watching their vote. And so that really makes me feel like we're having influence in our community. You can teach your congregation how to lobby their legislators. I take a group into my legislator's office and I show them how easy it is to lobby their legislator in person. Well, most people think that when you walk into a legislator's office, you're always talking to the legislator themselves. That's really not the case. Sometimes you're walking in and you're talking, it may just even be the receptionist, depends on who's there, but you'll be talking to a legislative aide most of the time. So I'll bring this group of people in, walk into the office, show them exactly what you do. You greet the receptionist, you sit down and talk with the legislative aide. It takes about 10 minutes to tell them what your position is on a piece of legislation. And I promise you, when a citizen walks into their legislator's office, they notice. Yes, a phone call is important, a letter is important, but when citizens walk into the office, 2, 3, 4, 5 people walk into the office, the legislators really take notice of what you're saying. And you do not have to be a professional lobbyist. You just have to be a concerned citizen. And I think the fact that a person walks in inexperienced and maybe even nervous about walking in, that even says a lot to that office about how strongly you feel about this legislation, that you're willing to put all of that aside, walking in nervous and expressing your opinion on a piece of legislation. So that's one thing that you can do. Also, producing voter guides for local elections. A lot of state policy councils produce voter guides for statewide elections, sometimes judges, some of the larger offices. But do you know that most people do not know where their city council and school board members stand on the issues? How many times have you gone in to vote and you don't know where all the candidates stand? If you go to faithandpublicpolicy.org, there is a guidebook on producing voter guides for local elections. This can be done by one person, this can be done by a whole team of people. But that guidebook is going to explain all the descriptions of all the job duties. I also offer templates for producing these voter guides, templates for sending out letters to the candidates. Everything is there and can be downloaded, and it's all free. And so not only do I produce 5 voter guides for school board and city council races, but I've trained other people in my community a little further out from my church to produce voter guides. One year, we shared our voter guides, and we had a total of maybe 12 or 14 voter guides for all the local elections. So that's something that can impact the school board and the city council races and get people with your values elected to office. Another thing you can do is pray. Pray, pray, pray. And we have a prayer meeting once a week. We gather before our Wednesday night service and we pray for our nation, and we put together a prayer guide, because through all of this that I'm describing, prayer comes first. That is the foundation of everything. If we are not praying, we are just going to sound like the loud clanging cymbals. We need to have the right attitude ourselves, and we need to love others who don't hold the same view we do, but we need to be praying for our elected officials, as the Bible tells us we should do. Creating an internet presence. I happen to have at my own CIT a website that is updated every week with current news, activities that are taking place in my church, and any type of cultural event. And so if you can find someone that has a little internet savvy, that can easily be set up and get information into the hands of people. They don't even have to be coming to your culture impact table every week. They can get it online. So I do that once a week, and I send out an email once a week so that people are getting the most up-to-date news about what's going on, not only in my state, but across the nation. A Facebook page. Facebook page is so easy to manage, and that's one simple way to get information out to the congregation. So I have people that have signed up for our Facebook and our website updates, and they're from all over the country, but it's something that really does keep the church informed about what's going on. But be creative about what it is that the information that you want to get out. So not only do we teach the church to take action by giving them action alerts and to walk in to lobby their legislators, but another way of lobbying is writing letters. And when we do that, you can take a look at that picture right there. That's the courtyard at my church. And when we were trying to repeal the law that says we have to have co-ed bathroom bills, the congregation came out en masse, and just on one Sunday alone, we collected 5,000 handwritten letters that were delivered to our governor, asking him to repeal that law. Now, this makes the congregation feel as if they are really participating and really fighting against these bad types of laws. But there's so many things that we can do as the church, and we just need to be creative and ask the Lord for vision. So, mentioned a lot of things here, talked about this big resource manual, but what I want you to focus on, even after all of this, is once you get back to your church, think about forming a team. Pray about who you could ask to join you, and get started. And maybe it may just be you for a moment, but the Lord will bring people along to help you. Think about how you're going to communicate with the congregation. Ask your pastor, can we do legislative action alerts? Can we have a website? Can we have a Facebook page? Can we have a culture impact center in the foyer or the courtyard of the church? Participate in the electoral process. Get people registered to vote. Learn about elections in your state and get the people registered to vote, and provide them with information that is allowed for churches to be passed out. And then influence your community, state, and nation. Along with that comes networking. Because we are a very active community, church in our community, legislators, city council members, school board members, they acknowledge our presence when we're asking for something. They'll listen to us because we are a large church. But even if you're not a large church, even if it's a few smaller churches, it can make a difference in your community. So, long-term impact. As a culture impact team leader, you need to maintain your priorities, which is, of course, is always the Lord first, your family, and then your ministries somewhere down the line. Avoid burnout. Don't get so caught up in this whole movement or this wanting to network and all that. When I first started, I was on that path. I could have been out every night because I was just really trying to network, but I had to remember what my priorities were, and I didn't want to burn myself out. Also, expect opposition. This is a spiritual battle that we're in. So, like I said, prayer through everything. You will be strengthened that way. It's not easy to sometimes be in the middle of a spiritual battle, but every time that I've been through a spiritual battle myself, the Lord always sees me through, and He's always with me, so I do not fear. But you will experience opposition, not only spiritually, but even maybe people from your congregation, and maybe even people outside of your congregation who will start labeling you political activists, or you name it. And look heavenward. Why do we do this? It's because we love our Lord, we love our family, we love our country, and we know that as Christians that we must stand up, because it is not, this America that we are living in now is not the same as when we were growing up, right? Things have changed so much. And, the things that our kids are exposed to nowadays, it's just really horrible. So I love this quote by E.M. Bounds. No man can do a great and enduring work for God who is not a man of prayer, and no man could be a man of prayer who does not give much time to praying. So I just really want to end with this. Please, in everything you do, consider the Lord. We're not doing this for our own benefit, but we're doing it because we love our Lord. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.